Hey, what's going on guys? ArtificialRest here, and today's video I'll be bringing you a Photoshop tutorial actually on a pretty cool text effect that I also used for a channel artwork and a logo for a friend of mine. And let's just take a look at what we will try to be creating. Hopefully we'll create something that looks sort of like this but with fewer letters, considering the amount of time it actually takes to create every single letter like that. But this is bottom line the effect that I am hoping to show to you guys how to create. So let's just jump right on into it and create a new document by pressing Ctrl N or going up to File and New, and we'll create it in a 7072 by 7072 pixel per inch document, which is basically what I use for the logos or profile pictures for like YouTube that I've made. And once we have this, I also have some textures that I will be using, and we can go ahead and drag this texture into Photoshop or into the document, just size it up a little bit. And if you have, or if you can see any, like, I know this is supposed to be like a rock texture, so it is supposed to have these imperfections, but if I had this in my image, I would use some brushes or something to clean this out and get rid of it. But since we can scale it up without losing any, resolution to it or details to it, we can only just remove it by scaling it out. So alright, once we have this, you can go ahead and rasterize this, because we will not be doing that much more with this background image, but we will be giving it a curve layer or adjustment layer later on. But for now we can go ahead and create our new layer and typing in some text. Now I'm gonna use AR for ArtificialRest, that seems to be the simplest, and we'll just scale it up a bit. I think that is about good, and we will just center it right in the middle. We can actually go ahead and not do that, but go ahead and scale it down even more. We can probably bring it down to just 400. I think that would look good, because we will add some, those small flames underneath, and it looks better if that can have some space to like fly off the background behind the text, instead of going out and looks like we had to crop the image. So right, now let's just center it again. And we can, now if you use different letters, you're probably wondering what font I'm using, and I'm using the Helvetica font. Damn, I can't say font, which comes standard with Photoshop, I think. Or does it? It probably, I think it does. Unless you can probably find somewhere to download it anyway. So, and I'm using the bold version of it, because if I turn it to regular, you can see that it's just way too thin for adding the magma. As you can see here, we have to have like a large letter, so we'll be able to create the effects the best way we can. So now that we have the text, just check if it's centered. Yep. Now that we have the text, we can go over to the next step, which is to basically figure out if you have enough room in between of the two letters, or all the letters, if you're like spelling out something. And as you can see, I have -25 on the spacing, which usually is good, but I can just bump it up to 0, so it's just a regular spacing. So it's basically all we need. So now comes basically the part which has the most work in it, well, almost the most work. So by adding some layer styles, we'll be simply creating the foundation or what this text effect is going to look like. So we'll pick the stroke and go to position and inside, and blend mode, we'll change it to lighten color. See if I just find it, lighter color, and we have 100%. We'll change the fill type to gradient, and we will change this to just 90. It's about to say minus 90, but basically just 90% or 90 degrees is good, and of course linear from top to bottom. And now the colors. So the colors we'll be using is an orange, which is FB830E, which gives us a nice bright orange color, and the white we will not use because we will change the opacity down to 0 so that we have from no stroke fading out or fading in to a orange stroke at the bottom. Alright, so that is pretty much the stroke. So let's go over to the other, which is color overlay, and we'll choose the blend mode. We'll just have it at normal and the opacity at 100, and we'll change this to 33, 33 and 33, which is a kind of grayish, deep gray color. Now next we will change the drop shadow, which will give the text a nice drop shadow. We will change this down to, or the drop shadow color down to 3 times 0, or 3 times double zeros, which will create a solid black. The opacity we will bump up to 85. We will tick off the use global light, because if we create when we will create another drop shadow on another object, it will create the same angle for every drop shadow we have applied to our layers. So we'll just click off that so that we can customize each light source angle of each object that we will be creating. So we'll do that and just keep the degrees as it is. We'll bump the distance up to 12. The spread will have it 0, and the size will bump up to 9. So we'll have sort of faded drop shadow, not 0 because that will make it just way too hard. We'll have it at 9. You can actually also bump it up to something like 12. So I'll just make a sort of a middle and just have it at, I'll just have it at 9. The basically, yeah, I'll just have it at 9 as it were. Alright, so on to the next, which is a inner shadow. Probably should have warned, there is a lot of layer styles. We'll pretty much be using everything here except satin. I think satin is actually the only layer style effect we won't use in this tutorial, so there is a lot to do in the layer style. So let's just go right on with it and choose the inner shadow, yes, and blend mode down to saturation. The color again will be black. The opacity we can bump up to 100. We'll take off the global light, even though the angle still is at 120 angle or degrees, and we'll pick this, or we'll turn it down to 0, and the choke still at 0, and the size will bump up pretty much to a size that will basically make it pretty much unnoticeable, except from when we start adding the other effects, but yes. And also we'll pick on the quality and click on anti-aliased, and the noise will have up to 14. And before I forget it, yeah, let me just, I think I have to change the back at drop shadow, the effect we just did, will change the drop shadow quality to anti-aliased as well. Forgot that, but tick it on, even though we don't change any of them or the noise. So inner shadow done, and the next thing we want to do is just the opposite. The let's see, the outer glow, which is basically not the opposite. I was thinking of inner glow, which we will add later on. So next up, outer glow, will change the structure to hard mix. There we go. And the opacity will take up to 100. The noise 15, yeah. And the color will not be a gradient, just a solid, and the solid will be black. And the elements will bump the technique will be softer, spread to 10, and the size to 2. Alright, so now we're at the quality. Now we are going to have to create a new quality for this, actually, because I don't think any of the qualities here is the one we want. So we'll have to create our own. And it's very simple. We're just gonna have it click and drag it right there in a sort of an kind of a slow arc. We'll put the input 55 and output 18. I think that is nice. I think that is what we need. So we'll not press on this button right here. We'll keep it as it is. And the next, over to the next effect is inner glow, which will make linear dodge, add, and the opacity up to 100. The color will be a solid color, which will be FAEAAC, kind of a pale yellow color. And the elements will have a softer edge and 2 zeros. No, sorry, actually not 0. We'll, of course not 0, that will leave us with no effect. We'll bump the size up to 8. Now I know this might look like a lot, but later on you will see that the white inner glow will be sort of faded, and you'll be glad it has a lot of inner glow now once we start creating the fire. And we'll tick on this, which will smooth the contour, which I probably should have already told you, but that is what it does. So alright, so now let's go on to our next effect, which is the Bevel and Emboss, which will make it sort of rounded around the edges. We'll choose the outer bevel, and as you can see we have a sort of like an edge here, like a transparent edge, like a plastic edge actually. And we'll choose the technique to chisel hard. The depth to a bit over 900, say 969. I think that would be good. And direction will be still at up, and the size will bump up to 4. Now down to shading, we can tick off this, and the angle we will set at -110 degrees, and the altitude we'll have at 30. The gloss contour we will change just a bit by just making it a bit more arched, not too much, but just a bit, just so you can barely see that it is kind of arched on the small image here. Alright, so the highlight modes. The first one, or the highlight mode, will change to normal. We'll change both of these to normal. We'll bump the opacity for both up to 100, and we'll change the highlight mode color to a solid, which will be a red, which is FA to a 0F, which gives us a bright, nice, bright red color. And the shadow mode will make a sort of a black, more black than gray color, which will be 19, 16, and 14. As you can see now, it looks really good already. All this in itself is a pretty cool texture, or effect actually. So let's just go on by adding, we'll add a texture to this bevel and emboss. And I already have the magma textures that I will be using, but for the ordinance sake, or for your guys' sake, I will show you how to get a picture to appear as a texture. So we'll just click and drag it up to this line here where we have our other layers, and for this first magma texture we'll create a black and white, which we can do by pressing Ctrl Shift and U, which will make it black and white. And what you will do now is go over to Edit, Define Pattern, and you can call it whatever you want, and just do the same of the pattern or of the magma texture with color. So you have two different textures, one magma texture with and one without color. So they will both appear here once you have saved them with the name you choose. And for the bevel and emboss on this first text, we will use the black and white one. The color, or the scale, and the depth are at 48 and -22, which is basically what we want. And this will make if you look closely at the small line on the inside of the A, if I click off the texture, you will see that changes just a bit, and that is the effect we want. Now it's kind of straight. Once we apply the texture, it looks more jagged and more like imperfect, which is just what we want, because the effect is that it has kind of burned out. So yeah, that's actually all the effects on the first layer of text. Once we've done that, we can actually go ahead and duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl J on our keyboard. We will right click and clear layer style, which will clear all the layer style from it. And what we will also do is go and double click on it, and in the default blending options, go into fill opacity and drag it all the way down, because all we want to see is the effects, not the actual text itself, because that we have this layer for. So for the first effect on this layer, we'll be adding a inner shadow. We change the blend mode to color dodge, and drag the opacity up to 100, press off, use global light, and the angle at -90 degrees, change the distance to 17, the choke still at 0, and the size up to 26. you can see just a little bit of difference, but we'll not have the gray color. We'll change the color to a orange color, which is let's see, F2 8627. There we have it, a good orange color. And as you can see, it all just adding an inner shadow just makes a good difference, and this is exactly what we want. This is gonna look really cool once we start adding some real magma textures instead of only on the bevel and emboss on the last layer. So alright, so let's also just check off this mark, and let's go ahead and add a new layer style, which will be the inner glow, and we'll change the blend mode to overlay, if I can find it. Yep. The opacity all the way down to 24 actually, because we don't want the inner glow to pop out as much as the inner shadow. We'll change the color to FC, FC, and FC. So pretty much almost make a clear white, but not completely white. And on the elements, we'll change the source to center. Just keep it at technique softer. The choke at 0, but we'll change the size up to 31, which will kind of fade the effect out, but just add some more lighter color to the text or to the letters. Down to the quality, we'll not change anything on that part. Now we can go over and add a bevel and emboss to this as well. Now on this bevel and emboss, we will have a inner bevel with smooth technique. The depth will still be at 100, the distance or the direction is up, but the size will change up to 30, which looks really bad now, but once we start tinkering with this with the shading, it will look better. We can tick off use global light, and the angle is the same, but we'll change the altitude to 39. The gloss contour, we can click on aliased or whatever, how the hell you say that word, and we'll change the highlight mode to saturation, and as you can see, that just made the huge difference. Also, we will change the opacity of this to 100 and the color to a solid black. We'll change both colors to a solid black, but the shadow mode will change to overlay. As you can see, the colors just made the orange just popped out much more. As the opacity will change down to 57. Alright, so we have added almost all of the layer effects or the layer styles that we want to add to the text or the letters itself, but there is still some to go. So the next we want to add is a pattern overlay, and now we'll choose the pattern with the color, and we'll change the blend mode to pin light. There we go, pin light, and we'll change the scale down to 50, or actually not. As you can see, we're pretty unlucky with the texture right there, so we can move it around, and I think that looked good. Yeah, that looks good. Link with layer checkbox should still be ticked on, just so you know. Alright, now for the next part, we'll change, or will not change, we will drag the magma texture into our document and just scale it up. We will rasterize it, and we will add a, not behind the background, just behind the text, and we will add a gradient map adjustment layer to this. And the color we will use for this is 4B, 4B, and 4B. And on the other side, we'll change it to 1A, 1A, and 1A, which make kind of a darkened negative color. But this will look different once we do the next thing. So we can check on reverse. Makes it look kind of better. But we'll change it some more so it will look better. Don't worry. Okay, so the next thing we will do is click on the magma texture layer and change the blending mode to color, no, not color dodge, but linear dodge. Linear dodge, there we go, and turn the opacity down to 36. And another thing we will do is press on E or go to the eraser tool, and we'll erase out the parts around the text itself, because the magma texture is more of a lightened effect, and small cracked background will show behind the text, other than just the stone or the stone texture that we had on beforehand. So we'll do this, and there we go. You can check it off if you want. If that doesn't look good to you, you can just click it off, but I'll click it on, because the behind the glowing text, the background wouldn't go darker, it would go lighter because of the light. So yeah, that is the reason why we did that. Okay, so I think this has been long enough. 30 minutes almost. So apparently I am going to have to split this up into different parts. So hopefully only 2 parts, but if I have to, I will split it up into 3 parts. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this first video, and the effects is looking pretty cool so far. We can pretty much see what we want to create, but there is still a lot more to go. As you can see, we have a lot of effects to add before this turns into the same effects as this. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this, and be sure to check out part 2 when it comes out, and yes, I'll see you guys in part 2 of this Photoshop tutorial.